Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. I'm joined with Pastor J. Rivenbark, Pastor Chris Rexroad. We are in the book of Ezra this week, Ezra chapter 9, and this will be the last podcast for the week, Friday. And we hope that you are reading along with us, listening along with us, studying along with us. Ezra chapter 9, we get this prayer, that's the way it's described, is a prayer from Ezra. And it says, when these things had been done, the Jewish leaders came to me and said, many of the people of Israel, and even some of the priests and Levites, have not kept themselves separate from the other peoples living in the land. They have taken up the detestable practices of the Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Ammonites, Moabites, Egyptians, and Amorites. For the men of Israel have married women from these people, and have taken them as wives for their sons. So the holy race has become polluted by these mixed marriages. Worse yet, the leaders and officials have led the way in this outrage. When I heard this, I tore my cloak and my shirt and pulled hair from my head and beard. He was upset. And sat down utterly shocked. Then all who trembled at the words of God of Israel came and sat with me because of this outrage. This outrage had committed by the returned exiles. And I sat there utterly appalled. The time for the evening sacrifice. So the problem now is they've been told this, not to do this before, but it is the problem. Like, right, it is the problem. They keep intermarrying and turning their hearts away. And Lord knows I don't want to have a big conversation about intermarriage right now. But this is the thing for them, okay? We find in Solomon, it's the thing that turns his heart away. You know, he marries all these women from other lands and falls in love with them, worships their gods. That's what's going on here. And he even describes it, says that's the worst part about it is the leaders are doing it. He basically tells the people, now you got to go back and you can't do this anymore. No more intermarriage, right? This has got to stop. When you are restored, when you get a second chance, why are extra precautions sometimes necessary after restoration that might not have been prior to?
I think part of that is the natural tendency to return to the previous issue, problem, or situation. And I think extra precautions are necessary. We often refer to it as accountability when you have other people around you to help you. And I think there has to be personal accountability so that you recognize when you start to drift or deviate from what God's asked of you or his standard that he's put in place.
The people obviously showed a weakness to either giving in or conforming to their surroundings every time that they were exiled, or even when they were wandering through the desert way back in Exodus, that they kept wanting to be like other nations. They kept wanting to serve other gods. They kept wanting to do these things. And I mean, if you're getting a second chance, it's crucial that some of those things are just put down in stone, basically saying that these things you cannot do anymore in order to want to move forward with having a healthy relationship with God.
Can you think of some practical things? I can think of a few, but I'd rather hear from you. Can you think of some practical things that if someone has been restored from a particular issue that they would be wise to avoid?
Well, one thing that comes to mind, let's say an individual they've been unfaithful in a marriage relationship, they've stepped out of that, they've committed adultery, then I think there has to be some significant restraints or accountability put in place to even avoid the appearance of. And I've heard counselors address this. I've heard Dr. Field speak to this, that if you have a problem with some of those safeguards being in place and the accountability issue, then you probably need to re-examine your motives. Are they really pure? And that application can apply to many aspects of life. If we've drifted away and been, quote, unfaithful to God, there was something that got us there. And as in this case, they became so comfortable with the culture around them that rather than keeping a distinguishing factor between them, that clear identity, that they just chose to lower the standards and become like them. And he's talking about it here again. You've done this one time. We're going to have to take some drastic measures to get back where you need to be. And so you've got to be aware of that. You have to know what your own weaknesses are and not place yourself in a place of vulnerability.
Yeah, the safeguards are, at first they can look like barriers, but really they're there to help us grow, because when we're transitioning out of what we used to do, it's very easy to kind of fall back into that groove. But as we're transitioning, those safeguards there kind of help prop us up, almost like a weak plant. It start growing you in the right direction so you don't start drawing back into that one thing. And eventually, as you grow enough, you look back at those as support and not barriers. But I mean, just going off an example, like if you have like a gambling problem, you should not go to the casinos.
Yeah, don't take your vacation in Vegas.
Yeah,
probably. I mean, it's really.
Yeah, don't go to those places. Now
or Chesapeake.
Or 24 other places now, and that's probably in driving distance.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you have issues with what you search online and what you look at when nobody's around, you need to establish times where there's somebody else around you, or you put some sort of permission settings on there just to help protect yourself, and definitely have an accountability person. Those are going to be things to help you in your journey.
Jokingly, I said, they just opened a new casino in Chesapeake, not Chesapeake, Portsmouth.
Portsmouth. I heard that. I don't know that, folks. I heard that.
And my understanding is they're building 2 others. But the thing, my observation about that is, Satan is always encroaching on you. He's always looking to push in. To it's not like you can't move far enough away to get away from his advances. You have to make some choices that are personal to keep him at bay. Because it appears to me that's the interesting thing. I as y'all been talking, that I believe is happening here. This intermarriage again, which has been a problem before. The way I understand it is he's speaking of it has happened since they have left Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten some freedom again.
Yep.
While they were in bondage, they were very, we got to stick to our kind. That's right. We got to stay with our people. But when they got a little bit of freedom, they're like, now we're free. We can do whatever we want to do. Yeah. And that's just a false sense of security. There are some things, for example, that I have been through that I am very guarded, that in my opinion, okay, I don't even have to commit an act at this point. I can't even allow the perception of it to be there.
Yeah.
Because if the perception of it is there, I have such small margin for error that if the perception of it was there, I would be in trouble, And I think that we have to understand that. We have to be aware of that restoration probably has limitations. That's the way I see
I agree.
Restoration
because it goes back to the principle, quote, success I think is more dangerous to us as individuals than struggle.
Right.
Because when we're struggling, as they were in captivity, we tend to stay more focused on doing right, following God, etc. And then, quote, success comes, and it's easy to get away from that.
Yeah, I've said that before. I mean, mountaintop experiences are where we would love to be, but when we spend time there, maybe a little bit too long, we let our guard down, and it's very easy for Satan to creep in because we're not paying attention to certain things, or we're over assuming certain areas are okay now.
We may come back to restoration in another time, but one of the dangers that I think comes with restoration is, okay, I've been restored. Nobody can say anything about this anymore. And I find, like with my grandkids now, I can't do it so much with my kids, but with my grandkids now, they need constant reminders.
Mhm.
There are things I need constant reminders about. There are things in my life that when I'm praying, I repeat daily because I just want them there. I want them to be a constant part of what I'm saying and who I am and what I'm doing. And I think restoration requires long-term humility and the understanding that some people will come along and not be comfortable with what you've done, and you've got to go out of the burden is on you at that point.
Yeah.
The burden's on you at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of, accepting the ownership of our actions. It comes with natural repercussions. We're forgiven by God, but people are a different story, And like you said, you might come across somebody 5, 10, 15 years later, and it's brand new to them. And you got to kind of go through that process with them.
And that's, I think about my own situation. There are still people it's brand new to. And I don't relive it like it doesn't affect me like it would have 20 years ago. But I have to be patient with them that, look at this, their first knowledge of this. They only saw this piece of it.
That's a good point.
And I may have to, walk through it with them. I would say to people who are in the process of restoration or have been restored, be careful of the defensiveness. It doesn't mean that the other person might not be being overly aggressive or judgmental, but you're responsible for yourself, not them. You can't change their actions.
Yeah.
You can only respond in a godly manner. And, sometimes it does require you to make choices. This seems like an extreme, right? Don't marry these people. I mean, am I wrong? Doesn't it seem like an extreme? Yeah, but she loves Jesus, but it was a safeguard it was for their protection, and because God knew what it was going to do, it becomes this step in a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And this bears it out. You become like the people you spend the most time with. Even though you may have good intentions on the front side of that, eventually you'll go toward whatever you're looking at. Same driving down the road, whatever you look at long enough, that's where you steer to. And it's the same in our everyday lives.
Yeah. There's two things I want to say about that. One, I knew a couple when I was living in Lumberton. They call it nighttime hypnosis, where you become focused on the taillights in front of you. And they were driving late at night, coming up 95 from Florida, had been on vacation, and there was this truck pulling a camper, and it got what they described as nighttime hypnosis, that that truck pulled to the shoulder of the road with that camper and stopped, and he just followed right behind it and ran right up under it, and it killed him. His wife lived, but it killed him. And you what you got your eyes on is where you're going to go.
Where you
that's the thing. The second thing I would say, because I think it would not be prudent to ignore intermarriage. There's a reason why you should marry people of the Christian faith.
Absolutely.
They need to have the Christian faith. People of other faith or no faith, either one, have a greater likelihood to steer you away from God than you have
Absolutely.
of
Drawing
saving
them
you.
to
That's
Him.
right.
Yeah.
You know, the illustration that I've used is, you know, it's like you're on a stool and they're on the floor, and you hook up with them, and there becomes this tugging match. If you're on that stool, they have more leverage on the floor
Yeah.
to pull you down than you do to pull them up.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're going to, you know, there's going to be this conflict constantly about, you know, are we Jewish or are we Christian? Are we Buddhist or are we Christian? Are we, you know, nuns? You know, I mean, that's the big thing now. No religion.
Yeah.
Or are we a people of faith? And if you have the options of a relationship today, choose somebody of your faith. It's critical.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not.
I mean, if you're going into that relationship with the intermarriage mentality, you're either saying that I'm accepting of who they are and what they do, and I'm willing to let that be in my relationship, or you're saying I'm anticipating changing them.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of those are good for
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Any other pieces of this y'all wanted to make sure we covered?
Just one thought, verse 7, that phrase he uses, he says, we have been steeped in sin. And my mind immediately went, you know, to tea bags, you know, put in there. That's a process.
That's
right.
right.
You know, it doesn't get contaminated and get the full flavor or taste of it immediately. That's a process that you go through. And the longer you sit there, the more you become like that and influenced by it.
Yeah, agreed. Good. Well, thank you for joining us today on One Single Story. I hope you'll be back with us on Monday as we begin a discussion about a brand new book. We'll see you then.